Hi kids, Mr. Peoples here. I'm going to give you a brief summary of the causes of the US-Dakota War of 1862. We did a full class seminar on this a couple of weeks ago, but I did want to give you a quick summary so that you can go back and look at the major causes of the war. First, all of this begins with the United States government and settlers wanting to move out to Minnesota territory, and Minnesota was in the process of becoming a state in 1851. And in 1851, the Dakota signed a treaty with the United States government that said that the Dakota would live on a 10-mile wide strip of land. In return, the United States government would pay the Dakota a yearly payment of food as well as money. And so the Dakota agreed to this treaty. Not everybody, but the leaders that were there were asked to sign, and if they were told that if they wouldn't sign, they would be removed anyways. And so they basically were forced to sign this treaty. So they signed the treaty, they were moved on to that reservation, and then they were expected to get food and money payments each year. And that's where we get into the causes of this US-Dakota War. One of the first causes of this war is that the government payments, the food payments, were almost always late. And that means that the Dakota people who couldn't leave the reservation to go hunt and get food, according to the agreement that they made, they were starving. They had family members, they had children, wives who were starving, and without the government food, that was very difficult for them to deal with. And then you had the government payments. The payments from the government was also late, and sometimes it wasn't even given to them because the traders, who we're going to talk about next, would take that money, claiming that the Dakota owed them for different goods and services. Let's move on to the traders. The traders would trade with the Dakota. They ran what were kind of like general stores, and they would sell things to the Dakota on credit, which means that a Dakota didn't have to have any money with them to purchase things. Unfortunately, the Dakota didn't keep track of their purchases while the traders did, and oftentimes the traders were dishonest. And so when the Dakota would get their annuity payment, or expected their annuity payment, the traders would take all of their payments and say, "This is how much that you owe me." And the Dakota really had no paperwork or information to back it up. And so the Dakota started to have a feeling of mistrust towards the traders. And at one point in 1862, just before this war starts, the traders stopped trading with the Dakota until the government payments arrive. And this causes the Dakota to starve even more. Matter of fact, one of the traders, as you might remember from the seminar, one of the traders, Andrew Myrick, told the Dakota that if they were starving that they could eat grass. And that was his attitude toward the Dakota. And that certainly didn't help things any. The government agent on the reservation, his job was to hand out the money and the food from the government, and just to kind of keep control of what was happening on that reservation. And in this case, his name was Thomas Galbraith. And Agent Galbraith, his part in causing this war to happen is when the government food finally did arrive on the reservation, he refused to hand out that food until the money arrived as well. And so the Dakota watch all of this food come in on wagons and go into this warehouse, and they know that food is theirs, but they can't have it because the government agent refuses to give them that food. And for no really good reason other than it was inconvenient for him to do so. And so the Dakota also become very angry about this, and it leads to the Dakota War. Now, while all of this is going on, there are groups of people called missionaries who are there to try and convert the Dakota into Christians. And the missionaries tried to get the Dakota to give up their traditions, to cut their hair short, to farm like whites, go to church like whites, go to school like whites. And that creates some tension because you had the Dakota who wanted their food payments, and there were the Dakota who didn't want to give up their traditions. And so some Dakota who cut their hair short, who started farming, they became known as the Farm Dakota. And they were the ones that were given the food and the money payments first. And then the traditional Dakota, the ones who wanted to keep their traditions, who didn't want to cut their hairs, who didn't want to be like the white man, they were then forced to wait longer to get that food and that money. And this creates not only tension between the missionaries and the Dakota, but it creates tension within the Dakota tribe as well. The traditional Dakota looking down on the Farm Dakota for having received that money and that food for having cut their hair short and farming like whites. And so all of these things in the summer of 1862 lead to the US-Dakota War, when the Dakota finally say enough is enough, and they decide to attack. They attack not only the traders and the government officials on the reservation, but then they start to expand out and attack settlers, white settlers in southwestern Minnesota. If you would like more information about that, I encourage you to go to the website that I have linked on the webpage, the US-DakotaWar.org. That webpage has all kinds of details and resources you can look at. But as far as like how things started, the reasons why the war happened, hopefully this seminar has helped you get some of that information. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in class.